Recovering a lost masterpiece of analysis, the burned third edition of de la Vallee Poussin's Cours d'analyse infinitesimale by Mawhin, Ponce, and Willem. I'm Dr. Samuel Allen Alexander, mathematician and philosopher, still here, reading this article published in 2026 in the notices of the AMS. And it's a very appropriate article because I'm currently in Europe myself. I'm in Vienna. In a couple of days I'll be traveling to Graz for a math biology conference. Introduction. In August 1914, during the first weeks of World War I, the Belgian city of Louvain was the scene of a tragedy whose effects reverberated across the academic world. The university library, one of Europe's leading scholarly collections, was set ablaze and completely destroyed. Its destruction caused an international outcry, particularly in the United States and in several European countries. Along with 300,000 books and countless manuscripts, the fire consumed a mathematical treasure. The third edition of Volume 2 of Charles-Jean de la Vallee Poussin's Cours d'analyse infinitesimale, then still in press at the Oist-Preuss printing house adjacent to the library. De la Vallee Poussin himself described the event with characteristic restraint, noting that the nearly completed edition was supposed to appear at the end of 1914, but has been burnt in Louvain with many other more precious things. This lost edition was not simply a new printing, but the mathematically richest version of a foundational treatise. More than a century later, through the unexpected discovery of surviving galley proofs kept in the archive of the de la Vallee Poussin's family, it has become possible to reconstruct a substantial part of what vanished in 1914. This article tells the story of that reconstruction carried out in a work in 2025 and the historical significance of what it restores. Charles-Jean de la Vallee Poussin, mathematician and teacher. Poussin, 1866 to 1962, was one of the most influential Belgian mathematicians of the early 20th century. Best known for his proof of the prime number theorem, proved independently by Joe Hadamard at around the same time, he also contributed decisively to measure theory, Fourier series, complex analysis, approximation, and potential theory. He served as the first president of the International Mathematical Union in 1920 and taught analysis at Louvain from 1892 onward. His Cours d'analyse infinitesimale, a two-volume treatise first published in 1903 to 1906, quickly became the foundation for teaching analysis in Belgium and an influential reference abroad. Remarkably, Volume 1 went through 12 editions, the last in 1959, and Volume 2 through 9 editions, the last in 1957. The work is celebrated for its clarity, elegance, and the way it introduced cutting-edge ideas directly into undergrad education. The 1909 second edition of Volume 1 was the first textbook to present Lebesgue's theory of integration only a few years after its creation. The now lost third edition, 1914, of Volume 2 represented the culmination of these developments. After World War I, the textbook largely returned to the content of the first edition and remained essentially unchanged in the many subsequent editions. Its elegance and rigor remained, but most of the early 20th century advances in integration theory were dropped, creating a gap in the history of the subject and in our understanding of how de la Vallee Poussin blended research and teaching. The sack of Louvain and the disappearance of the third edition. In late August 1914, shortly after German troops entered Louvain, they set fire to parts of the historic center, including the university library and the printing house preparing the third edition of Volume 2. Photographs of the ruins reveal the remains of the Baroque library interior and the devastated facade with the rubble of the nearby workshops. The reaction was especially strong in the United States, where the destruction of a medieval university library was widely perceived as an attack on learning itself, at a time when American universities strongly identified with the European academic tradition. Newspapers across the country reported the loss as a symbol of the war's assault on learning and culture. In response, American universities organized an unprecedented fundraising effort to rebuild the library. The new building, designed by the American architect Whitney Warren and inaugurated in the 1920s, was financed largely by donations from U.S. institutions, students, and faculty. The reconstruction became a powerful gesture of international academic solidarity, and the library remains today one of the most visible reminders of this American support. Figure 2, caption, Ruins of the Louvain University Library in August 1914, postcard issued as The Sack of Louvain. Figure 3, caption, Design for the new Louvain University Library, rebuilt with American support after World War I, watercolor ink wash. As far as Poussin's course is concerned, the loss was total. His own testimony in his 1915 Transactions of the AMS article confirms that the third edition was in the press during the fire of Louvain. The Germans burnt this volume. All the materials of my publisher indeed shared the fate of the university library. In that paper, Poussin reproduced the lectures he delivered at Harvard University during the academic year 1914-15 on portions of the new material related to the Lebesgue integral, material that had just been destroyed. By dedicating the article to Harvard, he acknowledged the generous invitation that had enabled him to leave Belgium following the sack of Louvain. Post-war editions of the course did not restore this content. As Poussin explained in the advertisements to the 1920s editions, reconstruction of the lost edition would have required resources and time unavailable in the immediate aftermath of the war, owing to the serious material difficulties. Poussin thus removed the sections on the Lebesgue integral, not for mathematical reasons, and expected to write a new volume 3 that never appeared. The result was that the most advanced treatment of integration theory he ever wrote in a textbook vanished from the historical record. What the third edition contained. Unlike the later editions, the 1914 version of Volume 2 relied on conceptual improvements based on 20 years of research and extended Lebesgue's ideas in several directions. A refined theory of multiple Lebesgue integrals, a systematic treatment of additive set functions with bounded variation influenced by Lebesgue's 1910 memoir, new results on nets and derivatives of set functions, a more modern integration by substitution theorem, developments related to generalized second derivatives in Fourier series. The second edition of Volume 2, 1912, already contains substantial innovations, some preceding or independent of those of Nikolai Luzin, but the third edition was even more ambitious, incorporating results that Poussin had recently obtained or refined. Had it survived, it would today be recognized as the most advanced early textbook treatment of Lebesgue integration and its applications. It is worth noting that the third edition of Volume 1, completed shortly before the war, did appear in print. In that volume, Poussin refined his exposition of Lebesgue integration, with an emphasis on the set theoretic foundations of measurability and on the construction of the integral in one dimension. The lost third edition of Volume 2 was intended as a natural continuation of this program, extending it to several variables. In the absence of Volume 2, the third edition of Volume 1 of the course remained the most advanced early textbook exposition of Lebesgue integration, but it is essentially limited to the one-dimensional theory and its set theoretic foundations. The second edition of Volume 2 came closest to realizing the broader program concerning multidimensional Lebesgue integration, yet it did not incorporate the full range of conceptual and technical developments planned for the third edition. Its disappearance therefore left a genuine gap in the evolution of the course, since only part of the intended revision survived. Figure 4, Charles-Jean de la Vallee Poussin, circa 1900. Look at those glasses. And look at that mustache. Wow. Fashion back then. Section 5, the unexpected discovery of surviving Gallie proofs. For decades, mathematicians believed that the third edition had been completely lost. The only glimpse of its intended content came from the final sections of Poussin's 1915 Transactions paper on the Lebesgue integral. This changed when, during the preparation of Poussin's collected works, one of the authors, was shown a bundle of old Vallee proofs preserved by a great-grandson of the mathematician. Among them were several chapters from the lost edition of Volume 2. These proofs included the end of Chapter 2, improper integrals, exact differentials, the complete Chapter 3, multiple Riemann and Lebesgue integrals, the beginning of Chapter 4, analytical representation of functions in Fourier series. This material offered for the first time a substantial picture of the missing edition. It also included annotated pages from the second edition that had been prepared for revision. We have no information about possible modifications to the remaining chapters of the third edition of Volume 2. However, those chapters concerned more classical topics that were largely unaffected by the developments that followed the introduction of the Lebesgue integral. They included, for example, the fundamental theory of ordinary differential equations, introductory material on linear partial and total differential equations, basic notions of the calculus of variations and finite differences, and selected applications of calculus to geometry. Reconstructing the lost edition. Using these Vallee proofs as a foundation, the reconstruction underlying our edition followed two principles: to preserve the exact content of the proofs whenever they existed, and to insert the annotated second edition when the third edition proofs were missing. The surviving proofs covered sections 67 to 140. Sections 141 to 160 were reconstructed entirely from the second edition, incorporating the author's plan changes visible in his annotations. The result is a volume approximately 28 pages longer than the published 1912 edition. Most sections, especially later more classical topics, could not be reconstructed and are reproduced in our 2025 work as in the 1912 version for completeness and historical context. While we have endeavored to stay true to the ghost third edition of Volume 2, the reproduction of these chapters represents our best attempt to remain faithful to the structure and spirit of the original work. Why this reconstruction matters. Publishing the reconstruction fills a missing link in the evolution of Poussin's ideas on Lebesgue integration and additive set functions. Until now, the main landmarks in this development were the second edition and the first volume of the third edition of his course, his Harvard lectures published in the Transactions, and the monograph in 1995 based on his course at the Collège de France during the winter of 1915-16. As explained, none of these sources fully realized the broader program developed for the third edition of Volume 2 with regard to multidimensional integration. More generally, the reconstruction also fills a missing link in the early history of integration theory. It shows how Lebesgue's ideas were integrated into the curriculum just a decade after their creation, how Poussin's research shaped his teaching, and vice versa, how ideas on primitives, convergence, and multidimensional integration evolved, how mathematical knowledge can be lost through war, fire, and circumstance. It clarifies how early analysts understood and taught Lebesgue's ideas before measure theory took its modern form. It also revives the most mathematically ambitious version of a treatise that profoundly influenced generations of analysts. Many senior mathematicians recall the course as the book that shaped their early mathematical sensibility, praising its balance between clarity, rigor, and originality. The reconstructed third edition of Volume 2, published more than a century after its disappearance, restores to the mathematical community a lost piece of its heritage. While it can never replace the original object destroyed in 1914, it brings new light to Poussin's contributions and to the formation of Lebesgue integration as a central component of 20th century analysis. It also stands as a reminder of the fragile, material nature of mathematical culture. Ideas may endure, but books and manuscripts can vanish. Recovering them when possible reconnects us with the lived history of mathematics and with the moments when new theories first entered the world. Very interesting article. It really is striking the difference between publication back then and publication nowadays. Back then, publication was a physical process of printing the book on paper, and you didn't have it stored in email. Makes you wonder whether World War III will see the destruction of data centers, and maybe we'll be shockingly, rudely surprised to find that email is not permanent either. But that's just speculation. I'm Dr. Samuel Alan Alexander, mathematician and philosopher. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.